what we will do is we'll try to focus upon methodology. ठीक है, I say this again and again कि UPSC aspirants को ना there is no lack of content. What they basically lack is the way in which that content has to be used. What we will do is we'll focus on methodology of answer writing. We will focus on why the question was asked, what basically has to be your reasoning when you provide the answer, and third is how to build that structure. इन तीन चीजों पे we will basically focus, I and Abhishek sir both. ठीक है, so let us start with IR. The first question that we were taking into consideration when it came to IR, देखो one thing is for certain that UPSC UPSC in all the years that it has asked questions on IR, now what it will do is one question will basically focus upon a area. ठीक है, one question will basically focus upon an area. अफ्रीका के ऊपर for sometimes there was no question, so we had in a way predicted that Africa will be in focus again and अफ्रीका पे question आ सकता है. देखो otherwise what we see is in the last 1 year West Asia was in news, but West Asia has been asked too often in the recent years. ठीक है, it has been asked too often. Plus what we have done with Africa is we have come up with new initiatives that were not that much in news. ठीक है, because देखो frankly speaking Africa is not a glamorous continent for that, मतलब not because मतलब मैं racist हूँ, just saying कि Africa in that way is not a glamorous continent or not a glamorous region. So what we do in Africa ना, that is not much focused upon in the media also. हाँ कहीं पे एक line आ जाएगी, but yes, it was in news. The platforms that we have built with Africa and the partnerships that we have built with Africa ना, they were in news. हमारा काम है उन partnerships पे to elaborate what will be basically the future of India and Africa together. ठीक है, question again was not that difficult if you take into consideration this question. If you basically take into consideration this question, and if I let you know what was the logic behind asking this question. Now what basically was the logic behind asking this question? The first thing that you have to understand is whether it is Africa or whether it is any other region or whether it is India's bilateral relation with any country, what UPSC has started doing and what government of India has also started doing, and because government of India is doing it in its foreign policy, UPSC is asking those questions. We have moved from traditional approach or traditional relations, that is cultural relations, security relations. देखो these are still important, but what do we see, what do we basically see in recent years is we are getting into new domain. For example, energy cooperation, for example space cooperation, for example AI cooperation. ठीक है, so please take into consideration these areas, and in the coming times also when you will be expected to write your 2026 का means ना, again question on cooperation will be built upon a new tool of cooperation, new tool with which countries will interact with each other. ठीक है, maybe space, maybe AI, maybe something else, but अभी UPSC is less and less interested in traditional ways in which countries dealt with each other. So first is that. Second reason is India's global south narrative. ठीक है, देखो whenever basically it comes to Africa or maybe Latin America, ठीक है, Latin America is the most ignored continent I will say when it comes to UPSC. Maybe next year you will have a chance to write on Latin America, ठीक है, because in coming times we are going to have a lot of visit by Latin American heads of states and heads of government to India, and our head of government, that is Prime Minister Modi, will also be visiting those countries. ठीक है, so when it comes to Africa and Latin America, na, use this particular narrative of South-South cooperation, and India also focuses on it. India basically also focuses on it. So this is another reason that orientation of the question has been in that direction. ठीक है, with respect to West Asia, you may not use it, मतलब वो chance कम है. With respect to Central Asia, also it does not fit in the definition as such. ठीक है, but with respect to Africa and Latin America, ना ये fit होता है, and you have to take it that. Third is India's emphasis over the last 3 or 4 years, or I would say last half a decade, on global digital divide. Global digital divide. ठीक है, India had emphasized upon it in the last G20 summit also. India had emphasized upon it in the last BRICS summit also. ठीक है, and last will be of course whenever you study in IR, now whenever you take into consideration any region, any country, any continent for that matter, look into the influence of China. Indian foreign policy right now for UPSC aspirant, it cannot be studied in the right manner until and unless in that particular area, in that particular country, you are not considering what China is doing and how China is influencing us and how we are influencing by our efforts the reach of China. ठीक है, एक चीज, one thing I will make it clear over here, whatever the question might be, ना कभी ये मत लिखना, never write it down कि India's influence or China's relation with a particular country or that country's relation with China, suppose Uganda's relation with China, do not write कि we are against it. ये लिखना ही नहीं है. Why? Because Indian foreign policy का one of the principles is we treat all countries to be sovereign and equal and we do not interfere in anyone's internal matter. हाँ, our answers orientation should be कि influence of China should not push back our influence or our strategic importance or our requirements. ठीक है, your answer basically should be in that direction. So these are basically the 4 reasons on the background of which the question has been asked. ठीक है, whenever you study now, what I want you to do is any theme or any subject for that matter, what has to be done? First and foremost, now understand overall demand of that particular subject, and second is demand of that particular thing. So if I go by overall demand of a particular subject now, and if I take IR into consideration, दो ही चीजें मैटर करती है, how India is influencing the world and how world events are influencing India. That's it. This is overall theme of IR for you. ये दिमाग में रख के पढ़ो, and then each theme you have to take into consideration depending upon it individualist approach that is needed to be built. देखो, if you take into consideration this year's paper and questions now, what we have seen is UPSC has become more specific. It does not mean कि आपके पास लिखने के लिए नहीं है. You have enough to write. ठीक है. One thing that I would basically want you to do is now take into consideration current affairs of last 2 to 3 years rather than just 1 year. Last 2 to 3 years के current affairs now have become important, not just last 1 year. ठीक है, that we will see in polity also and governance also. My emphasis though is कि what has happened today, especially in IR, it has some origin in the last 2 to 3 years. Or connection of the question is such now that you have to build that particular connection. You have to basically build that particular connection, and in this please take help of your mentors. आप ये अकेले नहीं कर सकते. If you do it on your own, you will create a mess. ठीक है, you will basically create a mess. ठीक है. Now let us go back to the question. I will read you the question, and then what we can do is we can basically move ahead and discuss what answer has to be written to it. Answers of this question you will get it tomorrow or day after tomorrow. We'll compile it and we'll provide it to you. So those will be your model answers. चलो. Let us look into the question. What does the question say? Question says India-Africa digital partnership is achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. Elaborate. ठीक है. What is the directive word over here? What basically is the directive word over here? Elaborate. ठीक है. Whenever elaborate is your directive word now, what has to be done? You have to basically break down in themes or dimensions. You have to break down the dimensions into sub-dimensions. That means आप ऊपर से बोल नहीं सकते. You cannot give surface level information and move ahead and talk about the impact. वो नहीं होगा. You have to detail about that particular dimension, what has happened in it, what has happened in that particular dimension. ठीक है. Second is when you talk about elaborate ना, what is also considered good, because you are talking about facts. ठीक है. When it is elaborate ना, you are talking about facts, you are breaking down that particular dimension into sub dimensions ना. So what is considered to be good? Examples. In all the directive words, in elaborate the requirement of examples is the most. All right, requirement of the examples is the most. And then what has to be done is you have to move towards implications of those dimensions or implications of that particular fact. Done? कोई problem नहीं है now with respect to the directive word elaborate. आगे बढ़े. Let us look at the answer now. Okay. ठीक है. I will read the question once again. फिर से एक बार I will go through the question. India Africa digital partnership is achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. Elaborate. Now यहाँ पे ना please focus upon one thing, and that is they have not asked about any specific partnership as such or any specific platform as such. So what has to be done? The platforms that are in work right now between India and Africa, which we have promised to co-develop or already we have co-developed ना. you have to bring more and more of those platforms and showcase and basically showcase how it is built on mutual respect. When I say mutual respect, then it means that basically means कि we are not making Africa dependent on ourselves. ठीक है, that is the first first requirement of the answer. You have to showcase how we are not making Africa dependent on us. Second is co-development. Co-development mein you have to showcase how now the relation between India and Africa is not of a buyer and seller. It is not of a buyer and seller. ठीक है, this is the second requirement. This is the second point where you will focus. And the third point that you will be focusing upon is long-term institutional partnership. Long-term institutional partnership, whenever you see na, then you have to focus upon what could be the long-term goals that this digital partnership is wanting to achieve. So there are basically two fields. There can be more also, but at this point of time, as a student in the examination hall, the themes that should come to your mind should be education and health. फिर उसके ऊपर लिख दो, ठीक है, how it is a long term plan that we are together developing. That's it. Now based upon this, in the end, bring it to implication. Bring it to implication, your answer will be done. Your answer basically will be done. In the beginning, what you can show is, in the beginning, in the introduction, अगर if I had to build my introduction, ना, in my introduction, what I will showcase कि ठीक है, it is age-old relation, ठीक है, but what is happening with this particular age-old relation? It is entering into new dimensions, such as digital cooperation, which will lead to development of both India and Africa and build a stronger bond. खत्म हो गया. This is your introduction. इससे ज़्यादा there is no need. 10 marker है. देखो in 10 marker ना, what I will say is 1 mark is for introduction, 1 mark is for conclusion. इधर ज़्यादा दिमाग मत खपाओ. ठीक है, ठीक है. What I have seen over the period of time is students waste 5 to 10 minutes on introduction itself. जरूरी थोड़ी है. यहाँ पे हम लोग खड़े-खड़े एक introduction बना दिया. Now let us go to the main body. Let us basically go to the main body. In main body, what will be your first focus? As I told you, first focus will be mutual respect. ठीक है, mutual respect. What you can also do is, you can create a bridge sentence. What is a bridge sentence? Introduction and body के बीच में ना, what you can do is, you can specifically direct your introduction कि हाँ ठीक है, digital partnership, what it is doing is, it is creating a long-term partnership which is based on this and this principles. ठीक है, अगर हम लोग mutual respect की बात करें तो what has to be showcased? We have to showcase how, what we have to write is cooperation is based on the principle of equality. It is based on the principle of equality and does not substitute sovereignty of African countries and African people. What has also to be put in when we talk about mutual respect is, India's orientation towards capacity building. ठीक है, अब यहाँ पे क्या करना है ना, you have to link capacity building with mutual respect. How is it? Basically, मतलब we are not acting like providers. We are not acting like masters. What we are doing is we are making them equal partners. ठीक है, that has to be taken into consideration. Now, when we talk about co-development, यहाँ पे एक example देना था. तो in example you can mention, basically what you can do is, you can mention Pan Africa E-Network project. It was started long back in 2009. Pan Africa E-Network project. Again, you do not need to go back and read thousands of pages for the purpose of, pulling up one or two initiatives. देखो, whenever there is an editorial in any newspaper with respect to India Africa cooperation ना, ये project उसमें रहता ही है. Name of this project will be there in it. And one more important thing with respect to this project was, who was pioneer of this project or who was the brainchild of this project? It was APJ Abdul Kalam. That is also the reason why this project becomes important. Next is co-development. Co-development obviously means we are co-creating something with Africa. ठीक है, तो make that a point. What we are oriented towards is not buyer-seller relation. not buyer seller relation, but we are oriented towards co-creation. What this will lead to, it also showcases India's orientation towards wholesome development of global south. Wholesome development of global south, that is intellectual development of global south, not just material orientation towards development. ठीक है. Focus of co-development is to create new personals equipped with those particular skills. Showcase that India's partnership is oriented towards long-term development and sustainable goals. Economically sustainable goals. Economically sustainable goals. ठीक है. And यहाँ पे you may bring in institutionalized platforms like e-Vidya Bharati and e-Arogya Bharati. One focusing on education, one focusing on health.